Okay, I'd like to introduce Mark Douglas. Mark is best known for his books, probably The Disciplined Trader and my favorite, Trading in the Zone, which I had the privilege of writing the foreword for. I have to tell you, Mark's book, Trading in the Zone, really had a big impact on me because it deals with the mental aspect of trading. You can also find out more about Mark's products at markdouglas.com. So here he is, Mark Douglas.
A lot of familiar faces. I'm just getting in front of the room. I'm kind of amazed, actually, how many people I recognize. It's pretty nice. What's that? What? You have to get the microphone volume turned up? Oh, you can't. You couldn't hear me just then? Really? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Oh, well, first of all, I don't think this microphone is on for you. This microphone is on for that back there. So I don't actually have a microphone. This is not amplifying my voice. So if I'm not talking loud enough, just let me know. Normally I talk loud enough. I don't know why I maybe started out. So anyway, it's nice to be here. It really is. It's nice to be. I flew in from Scottsdale, Arizona, and who read the paper today? Who read the Orlando paper? Nobody read the paper this morning? You did? Only one person? Yeah, there's an article actually in the Orlando paper about middle way through the front section talking about how hot it is in Arizona right now, or at least in Phoenix. People don't seem to believe just how hot it gets there, but I'm telling you, it really gets hot. It's like, how many people had the heat on last night in their room? I'm not kidding. I'm really not. Last week we had temperatures up to, if the news stations report the temperatures of being 116, that means there were 118 to 120. And we set a record last Monday for the highest low temperature in Arizona recorded history. It didn't get below 96 degrees. That was our low of the day, 96 degrees. Now, not to take anything away from Arizona weather, because 8 months out of the year, it couldn't be more heavenly in Arizona. I mean, the weather is absolutely spectacular, but we do pay for it. We pay for it this time of the year. And so, if you're interested in coming out to Arizona, I would definitely suggest it, late October through maybe April, but otherwise, this time of the year, be prepared for some really unbelievable temperatures. But this is what we need right here. We need this rain because we're in a really severe drought. But anyway, enough about Arizona. You guys want to know about trading, right? Trading psychology, more specifically. What I'm gonna talk about is the psychology behind creating consistency in your trading. And an interesting thing that I found even about 3 weeks ago, I did a presentation in Toronto, and there were probably about 100 people in the room, and I was really kind of amazed at how many people really didn't have a definition of what consistency was. Just think about it for a second, that they really didn't know, what does it mean to really create consistency? Like when I asked the question to the audience, nobody really could answer the question. What is consistency? I mean, if you're going to create it, if it's something that you're going to manifest in your life, I mean, or in your trading, it certainly has to be something that you know what it means. You have to know the parameters of it. And I'm just going to simply define consistency as, as a nice, steadily rising equity curve. That's all. Just a nice, steadily rising equity curve, okay, at a nice, say, 45-degree angle. Will that equity curve have any drawdowns? Yeah. But what kind of drawdowns? Small drawdowns. Small drawdowns that reflect any trading system or methodology or any particular way in which you decide to trade, the kind of losses that you will experience as a result of being a trader. It's a natural part of the business that we will have small drawdowns. But what isn't consistency are the kind of, let's say, a kind of equity curve that looks like this, with a huge drawdown, and build it right back up again, another huge drawdown, build it back up, and another huge drawdown. Now, most traders who don't understand the nature of trading or the nature of the psychology behind what it means to be consistent, they will attribute these huge drawdowns to something that happened in the market. They'll always try to find a reason to determine what is it about what the market did on this particular day or in this particular trade or whatever series of trades created this huge drawdown that caused that to happen. And then go on a search to find what it is. What I'm going to establish, hopefully today in the next 2 hours, is that those huge drawdowns are not the result of something you did not know about the market. They are not the result of something you did not know about the market. They are the result of something you didn't know about yourself. And there are ways to prevent that. And those ways to prevent it are what it means to really create a nice, steadily rising equity curve. And those ways basically fall into 4 general categories. None of this is, by the way, none of this material is in that book. So there's no point in looking. I just didn't want you to waste your time. There's no material in the book. You've got the videotape. I mean, come on. So you just need to sit back and listen. Anyway, so we got 4 basic categories. One is that you have to have an edge. In other words, you have to know enough about the nature of the market and how it moves so that you can determine when there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another. That's how I'm defining an edge. When there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another. And then the next category is that you have to learn how to think in the market's perspective. I just simply, as a heading, would say that you have to learn how to think in probabilities. Now this is really can be a this is really kind of where most traders have their, let's say, have the greatest amount of difficulty. And first, in recognizing what it is, what it means to think in probabilities, and then once they recognize it, implementing some process or series of steps where they're actually retraining their mind to think in probabilities. Now, this is what I'm going to spend most of the time on in the next 2 hours. And just before I even get into it, just so you kind of have a little bit of a background, is that our minds do not naturally think that way. Our minds don't naturally process information in a way that will cause us to, let's say, be in harmony with or have, let's say, be in correspondence with the nature of the way the market exists. And so we have to do something very specific to train our minds to think in probabilities if we want to create consistency. The third category is all the, let's say, conflicting energy that exists inside of us. I'm saying conflicting energy, conflicting beliefs, or whatever that would argue against us accumulating vast sums of money as a trader. Now, what kind of things am I talking about? Anybody have any ideas of what I might be talking about?
Just a general belief system.
A general belief system. What's that? Go ahead.
Say a general belief system maybe from childhood.
A general belief system about childhood, but can you think of anything specific?
Self-doubt.
Self-doubt? Well, okay, but anything more specific than that even?
Filthy rich.
Filthy rich. Now look at the word filthy and rich, okay? Where does that word filthy come from? It can come from a number of different sources, but what people have to understand is that we grow up. We can grow up. We don't say we do grow up. We can grow up with any number of things that we've learned throughout our lives that are going to fall into the category of what I'm going to just say are self-sabotaging beliefs. In many cases, they're religious-based beliefs. Because essentially, as traders, what are we doing? We're basically taking money from other people with no services rendered. That's basically what we're doing as traders. And there are a lot of religious beliefs that let's say that would really rail against the idea of doing something like taking money away from other people with no services rendered. And so as a result of, we build up our skills, we build up our knowledge about the nature of trading, we get better and better at it, and all of a sudden find ourselves, or maybe not in the moment find ourselves, but when we look back and with a little bit of introspection and say, why did this happen? We make trading errors. Errors that cause these kinds of drawdowns. Sometimes it can be simple ones. Like even a buy for a sell. I did it just the other day. It didn't create a huge loss because I caught it, but the point is that if I wasn't conscious of what I was doing and why I was doing it in the moment, I could have very easily let that trade go, and it could have been more than what I anticipated. And the problem is that when we experience these kind of drawdowns, they create psychological damage. They create the kind of psychological damage that's very difficult to recover from. Or it can be difficult depending on one's skill level and being able to do so. And what kind of psychological damage am I talking about? The lack of self-trust. We don't trust ourselves anymore. And when we don't trust ourselves to do what we need to do when we need to do it without any reservation, without any hesitation, what ends up happening is that we end up generating fear. And what we're going to find out in a little bit is that fear has a very insidious effect on our ability to be objective and see what the market is offering us in any given moment. Because we can define the market as this kind of never-ending opportunity flow. And the market's is basically giving us an opportunity in any given moment to get in, add to, detract from, or get out. But it's this never-ending flow. Now, if we're not perceiving it as this never-ending flow, the market's not causing us to perceive it that way. It's what's going on inside of us that's causing us to perceive it as something other than this never-ending opportunity flow. And those are the kinds of internal forces that cause these kind of drawdowns. That's the third area. The fourth area is learning, let's say, building a specific kind of mental framework that will allow you to recognize when you've crossed through the threshold of euphoria, so let's say from normal confidence to overconfidence, or from normal confidence to a state of euphoria. In other words, there is what I'm going to call a psychological threshold. Below this threshold, you're just confident. Once you pass through it, you're in a state of euphoria. And why would being in a state of euphoria be a problem? What's that? Loss of objectivity. Anything else? Feeling invincible. Why is feeling invincible a problem when you're interacting with the market? Everybody understands the implications? In other words, when you've crossed the threshold into a state of mind of euphoria, it is impossible to perceive risk. That is the nature of euphoria. In other words, the nature of euphoria is that from our individual perspective, from the perspective of our state of mind, in that state of mind, it would be impossible for me to perceive that anything can happen other than what I expect to happen. Anything. The only thing that's going to happen is what I expect to happen. And as a result of being so absolutely sure that what I expect to happen is going to happen, what would be the next step in this process? To break my money management rules, right? In other words, to put on a position that would be much larger than what I would normally trade. Maybe 10 times, maybe 20. Well, there's no risk. Why not? Right? Why not? Now, the problem, of course, with putting on an inordinately large position is that it doesn't take very much movement for the market to put you to put you in a huge losing trade. And the problem there is that if I've got this huge position on with being absolutely positive that it's going to work, and then the market just goes against me by just a little bit, I can go from this state of euphoria, from this state of, let's say, in essence, heaven on earth, to a state of extreme agony and pain of hell on earth virtually instantaneously. Can I not? And then once I get into this state of mind right here, I will be in mind freeze. My mind will freeze up. I'll be, let's say, paralyzed to do anything, and I just sit and watch as the market takes my money away. until something snaps inside of my mind, so okay, that's enough, and I get out. And then I look back at my equity and I see one of these huge drawdowns, okay, and I think, oh my God, how did that happen? Now, if you don't understand the underlying dynamics of what I've just talked about, you're gonna go look at the market, and you're gonna try to find what happened in the market that caused that. What set of variables, what set of market variables caused that to happen? You see, the market didn't have anything to do with it. Nothing. To create consistency, in essence, what we have to do is learn how to trade without making errors. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? But then what is a trading error? Okay, if that's the case, everyone say, did everyone nod their head? Yes, yes, okay. We're not, okay, it makes sense, right? To create consistency, I have to reach higher and higher levels of error-free trading, right? There's a correlation there. In other words, everyone sees the correlation, right? But then if I said, okay, what are trading errors? List them. What? Not following your rules is a trading error. Okay, good. See, but these are things you should be able to, whoa, well, right off the top of your head, right? You guys are all in the business of trading. Every single one of you would probably say, yes, my goal is to create consistent results. If I said, what do you want? What's your objective? What are you trying to accomplish here? Well, I want consistency. And yet, if we just established that consistency is a function of the lack of errors, you should be able to rattle off those errors right off the top of your head so that you could recognize them when you're making them. Right? What's the biggest error that virtually all traders make, except for the ones who have gotten to the point where they don't make them anymore? What's the biggest number one error that traders make? What? No. I know I'm right. Okay. Yeah. And so but see, I know I'm right. But how does I know I'm right manifest itself into a trading error? What?
Not exiting so that you can take what you see as the next correct signal, and you can't take it because you're locked in the wrong position that you did not exit.
I'll agree with everything you said. I'm just going to say it a little bit differently. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Not predefining your risk. Everything we just said, I'm just going to say it a little bit differently. Not predefining your risk. Now, I'm not going to ask people to raise their hands, but I bet there are people in this room who still will get into a trade without predefining their risk. Now, why won't people predefine their risk? Why is that so hard to do? Why do you think that's so hard to do? What do you think of the underlying dynamics are? Well, yeah, you don't want to be wrong. Now, see, when you've learned to think in probabilities, what you're going to learn, what you're going to understand, is that trading is not a right or wrong endeavor. It has nothing to do with being right or wrong. But this is really important. Yes, we don't want to be wrong, and we don't want to lose money. And there's a problem here in terms of the way our minds are designed to think. If I think of trading, getting into a trade, as being something I can be right or wrong about, and I have not accepted the risk, meaning I have not accepted the dollar value of the potential loss that I can incur from that trade by not predefining it, or by predefining it and still not accepting it, then my mind has the potential to associate whatever's happening in the market now with something that's happened in my past. Meaning our minds are wired to associate. Meaning that if I haven't changed the way that I think about trading, I have the potential to look at any given trade as, well, let's say any given trade has the potential to tap me into the accumulated emotional pain of what it means to be wrong, or every time I've been wrong in my life.
Personalized.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to say that again. If I haven't redefined trading to think about it in the appropriate way, based on the way that I'm going to explain in a moment, being wrong on a trade has the potential to tap me into the accumulated pain of every time I've been wrong in my life, because that's the way our minds are designed to think. They're designed to associate. So if that's the case, little wonder that I'm going to avoid predefining my risk. Because here's what's going to happen. For me to predefine my risk, see, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be in that state of pain. For me to predefine my risk, what do I have to do? I have to gather evidence that would suggest why this trade might not work. Right? I have to gather evidence to say, okay, what are the things that could happen that would tell me, or what does the market have to look like, sound like, or feel like to tell me this trade isn't working? And I have to gather evidence to tell me that so that I know how to recognize it. But the problem is if I gather too much evidence, I might talk myself out of the trade. Right? And if I talk myself out of the trade and it turns out to be a winner, then I could be in a state of agony that might be even greater than had I put the trade on and it turned out to be a loser. So how do I compensate? So I've got a mental dilemma here. I've got a dilemma. How do I resolve the dilemma? Gather enough evidence, in other words, have the trade be so technically or fundamentally sound, whatever method you might use, to the point where I have convinced myself that I'm right. And see, if I'm right, there's no risk. Right? Why predefine the risk if I'm right? There is no risk. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I was right.
That's an implicit risk.
What's that?
It's not doing has an implicit risk in this.
I'm still, there's people, go ahead, say that again.
Not doing still has an implicit risk that you don't associate it with.
Yeah.
Not doing something has an implicit risk in not doing something.
Right.
And that is also a risk that
Right.
you don't normally associate as a risk. Inaction. Inaction is a risk, actually. Fear.
Go ahead.
I think part of your belief system kicks in. Hope is something we are trained to have. We always look forward, hoping things will be better. So when I'm wrong, that fellow jumps off there and says, "Don't worry about it, go ahead."
I know exactly. I'm going to give you an example that really that typifies exactly what you're saying. And see, here's the thing. Here's the problem with trading. I'm just going to put up some typical errors that we make over and over again all the time. Let's see if we can we, how do we need to adjust it? Go forward or back? Oh, I'll just move it up a little bit. Anyway, here's what's interesting about these errors. Okay, one, hesitate, get in too late, jump the gun, get in too soon. Don't define your risk in advance of putting out a trade. Define your risk. Don't take your loss, and it turns out to be a bigger loss. Get out of a winning trade too soon. Leave money on the table. Get out of a winning trade. Let a winning trade turn into loser without having taken any profits. Move a stop close to your entry point. Get stopped out, and the market trades back in your favor. Now, here's what's really interesting about trading. And the biggest one, like I said, the biggest one is that not predefining your risk. And that, I just went through the whole dilemma of the psychological dynamics behind that. Did everybody understand that dilemma? Go ahead.
Could you just restate, you said being wrong has the potential of?
Tapping you into the accumulated pain of every time you've been wrong in your life. And that's definitely something we're going to avoid. Our minds will automatically alter the way we perceive the market to help us avoid that from that happening, okay? Now, I'll explain the underlying dynamics of that in a second. But there's a real important point that I want to make here, is that these are all trading errors. Will everybody at least acknowledge they're all trading errors? I mean, are we all together on this? Okay? However, here's what's really interesting about trading and why it can be so difficult to create consistent success, is because you can make every single one of those errors over and over again and still find yourself in a winning trade. You don't have to know. Yeah, right. what? The microphone didn't pick up, but someone back there said, "Thank God." Now think about the nature of trading. What skills do you need to find yourself in a winning trade?
Consistency.
What? No. What skills do you need to find yourself in a winning trade? None. Zero. Think about that. You don't need to know anything to find yourself in a winning trade. Right? Nothing. You don't have to have any skills whatsoever. And if you can find yourself in a winning trade without having any skills whatsoever, once, can it happen again? And can it happen again? Yeah, it can. We don't know what the limit is to how many times it can happen without having any knowledge whatsoever. What do you need to know to find yourself with a winning blackjack hand? Nothing. What do you need to know about roulette? Nothing. What do you need to know about craps? Nothing. What does that suggest to you? Do you see any correlations here? Do you see any correlations? What does that suggest to you about the nature of trading? It's gambling. Absolutely. Now, interestingly enough, when I proposed this in Toronto 3 weeks ago, they really railed against it. Oh, you would not believe how difficult it was for them to wrap their mind around the idea that trading was gambling.
Not very religious statement.
What's that?
Not a very religious statement.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly enough, to really be consistent, to create consistent results, you have to acquire a mindset that is really consistent with the kind of mindset that a good, not a compulsive gambler, but a professional gambler would have, or the kind of mindset that the casinos have.
Does that mean that living in Las Vegas?
I don't know. I mean, because look at it. What do the casinos do? They spend billions of dollars building these grandiose hotels. They have to, now think about this. They have to justify spending that kind of money. They spend billions of dollars, building these grand hotels to attract people into playing an event, wagering on an event that all of us know has a random outcome. And yet they create consistent results for themselves. There's a reason why. It's because they think about it in the appropriate way. As traders, if you can learn to think about this in the appropriate way, you can become the casino. Because your technical analysis will put the edge in your favor. You will get an edge. But if you can't use that edge appropriately, meaning that if you consistently make these errors or any other type of errors, you will not create consistent results. You will create random results. And the problem with creating random results, even though it can be a lot of fun because you can end up on huge winning streaks, because keep in mind, you can make every single one of those errors